Welcome to Powerhouse. Joining us today is Hiromi Okuyama, a content creator, actress, educator, and martial artist. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joy.
You have a super interesting and diverse background and skills, and you're still managing different but parallel careers. But first, give us a quick overview of your background, how you started, and how you got to your current position.
Well, I went to university for sociology, but I've always wanted to be an actress ever since I was a little girl. I don't know why. I always loved being on camera or being on stage. And that, even though I was really shy as a child, that's something that I've always wanted to do. And then I became an actress and I did mostly commercial work. So after university, I started, doing improv classes and doing on camera work. And then I got an agent and then I started doing mostly commercial work. And for 30 years, that's been the bulk of my work. I've done other stuff as well, film and television, voiceovers, but the bulk of my work is commercial work. And because the bulk of my work is commercial work, what happened was when short form video became very popular and
Mhm.
TikToks are essentially commercials. And so it's like, oh my goodness, this was perfect. And then that's how I was able to feel really comfortable and thrive on that platform.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't
Yeah.
realize, yeah, that is a good transition. What part of the commercial and the acting in the commercial that's the most interesting to you?
For commercial work, you know, I I just love commercials because they tell a story in such a
Mm,
short period of time. So even with TikToks, when I talk about TikToks, and I used to teach about short form video on Clubhouse, I still do. You know how there's 15 seconds, and you and your husband know that when you do a movie film trailer, right?
mm,
There's like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and 1 minute, and that's like a commercial as well. They have
right.
15-second spots, 30-second spots, and then 1 minute spots. And
Mhm.
it's interesting how you can tell a story or even the same story within those timelines. And I feel that's how like short form video is kind of like too. And
Yeah.
that's why I think I did so well because I knew about the beginning, middle, and end, how you have to hook them right away or else they'll like change the channels back in the day, and
Yeah.
how you have to have that story flow and how you have to have a good ending for impact.
Absolutely. So did you start TikTok fairly early on in terms of when TikTok came out, or kind of gradually like transition from the IG to the TikTok platform?
I have always been intrigued with social media, and I was on Twitter for the longest time. And then, of course, Instagram. I've been on it for over a decade. I haven't grown as much just because I've changed so much with Instagram, but that's another story.
Mm.
But with TikTok, as soon as it became popular, right before the pandemic, I got an account right away just
Oh.
because I actually saw an interview with Gary Vee and Charlie D'Amelio, and
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh my goodness, Gary Vee is my age, or I'm just a little bit older than him, and
Mhm.
Charlie D'Amelio is my daughter's age." And I thought it was so fascinating that this platform can kind of bridge the generations. So
Mm.
somebody who's my age can be on this exact same platform as someone that's my daughter's age. And
Mhm.
that's what intrigued me the most. I do talk a lot about generational crossovers in a
Yep.
lot of my videos. And so that's what intrigued me. And that's why I started one for myself and one for my father, who's a martial artist.
Oh, wow. That is
Yeah.
amazing. That is amazing. I kinda lean from the other contents, and Gary Vee, I love watching his stuff too. That's kinda
Me too.
inspiring, right? Or just,
Yeah.
the shorter form, just once in a while, just watch his content, go, "Oh, okay, I'm inspired again." So that is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of social platform, and that's how we met, right? I met
Yeah.
on Clubhouse, so that was
Yeah.
pretty amazing when it came out, and it's still amazing, just in a different
Yeah.
format. But we've been in all these different rooms, and I'm like, wow, you're doing amazing work, and I've been following you since that's like 2-3 years ago. Really cool that we get to meet virtually. Hopefully, we can meet in person soon one day.
Yeah. I
And
hope so.
you've been doing great in different platforms. So maybe talk about more about that journey, because then you
Yes.
became a Clubhouse icon.
I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be a Clubhouse icon. When I became icon, I actually heard many people said that that was one of their goals. I didn't know that people had a goal to be a Clubhouse icon. I had no idea. I
Wow.
just was like, oh, they pick all these epic people who would represent the app in different ways. I like how
Mhm.
they pick people of different backgrounds with different industries that they're involved with,
Mhm.
people. And they picked a lot of activists as well, which that's why I was also surprised.
Mm.
because the caliber of people they picked is incredible. And I don't want to downplay myself, but I was like, oh my goodness. And then when they picked me, I'm like, are you sure?
I
I
was
was
gonna
really
say, you
shocked.
do amazing work.
I was like super shocked up. I've been on Clubhouse since almost the beginning where it started growing exponentially. So it's kind of cool. I caught TikTok at the right time and I caught Clubhouse at the right time. And then at the beginning, when the pandemic, it was like 2021, that's where it really grew exponentially. And it was so popular. I remember
Mhm.
seeing you and Derek doing rooms almost every day,
Yeah.
you know, and then that was when everybody was in lockdown. So
Yeah.
everybody wanted to connect with someone. And that's what Clubhouse did. It connected so
Mhm.
many people from around the world.
Mhm.
And people didn't feel as lonely being in rooms and talking and listening to others and being inspired.
Right.
And so that was what I loved about Clubhouse. And as Clubhouse progressed, they started doing different things, introducing different things. And they did a beta test program for something called houses. And I
Mhm.
was part of the beta test program where I got a house early. You had to apply for it. And it was a martial arts house. And so that's how I started to get to know more of the employees and they call the power users, people who use Clubhouse a lot.
Oh.
And from there, that's, I think, because of my community growth and the way I was so present on the app and being consistent when other people left. I stayed consistently on. Eventually, I got the call that they wanted me and two other of my friends to be Clubhouse icons.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, so amazing. Sounds like a great experience. And I mean, as you said, like I think the key to social media is consistency, right? So you've
Yeah.
been very consistent with Clubhouse and your other platforms. And you touch on it in terms of what type of content inspired you and transitioning from what you're used to as a short form and commercial to short form like TikTok and translate
Mhm.
well to the TikTok and IG reels and the content in terms of the generational. So that's very interesting.
The people who watch my content and listen to my content, they inspire me. My initial inspiration is my relationship with my children, with my daughter, and then my relationship with my mother. So there's a lot of skits that I do on TikTok that kind of speaks to the relationships, the mother and a teen,
Mhm.
Gen X, well, I'm Gen X, or older millennial with their Gen Z child, right? And then a lot of people, Gen X or older millennials, they relate to me as
Mhm.
the mother. And a lot of Gen Zs, I was so shocked how many Gen Z supporters I have because they relate to my pretend Gen Z daughter. And then it just blew up and expanded from there.
That's amazing. And no, so
Yeah.
does your daughter do the audio for those skits?
Because I guess I'm a voice actress, a
Yeah.
lot of people think it's my daughter, but it's actually me.
Wow.
And I'm able to alter my voice or my expression. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of takes, as you know, as a producer, director yourself. I do a lot of takes so that it just sounds right or
Yeah.
it looks right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe explain the process of planning
Yes.
those out, right? Because, a lot of times, I mean, most people know it's a lot of work, but just don't know the extent of it. But, you watch
Yes.
it, it's very fluid and feels very spontaneous. But of course, a
Oh,
lot of work goes into it. It'd be interesting to explain, kind of just spell out the process in terms of whether that the TikTok or in IG Reels. How do you do it?
so for TikTok, they have something called duets. And so
Mm.
that's where I create the script.
Yeah.
And then, so I got inspiration from other actors on TikTok. And so I create this script and I add in the line for the other actor to duet me. So then it's a
Okay.
side by side. It's like we're almost auditioning together,
Yes.
right?
Got it.
Yeah. And so they play my Gen Z child and I play the mother. And
Ah.
this was inspired by a famous actor on TikTok named Eliane again. She did the blue line, and then
Yeah.
I copied, well, emulated her and did the green line, but my
Mm.
content's really different than hers.
Right.
So I do the mother, and then the Gen Z child
Mm.
acts beside me.
Got it.
However, on IG Reels, because I talk a lot about how each platform has its different culture and how we have to kind of adapt to that culture. We don't have to change our content 100%, but adapt to it. So IG Reels, the duet feature is not as popular, even though IG Reels try to come up with remix. So what I do with IG Reels is, why don't I do the voiceover instead?
Yeah.
So I do that on IG Reels. I do voiceovers on TikTok too, because when I double up on some of I'll do one duet and one voiceover, but IG Reels now I just do the voiceover.
Voiceover.
So I do that over there. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And a lot of your content is then I see it's very generational. It's relating to,
Yes.
different segments, even like the dad content, mom content, and interaction with Gen Z or son or daughter,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you mentioned that you were inspired and you see that that's a good content for that fits you. But how do you
Mhm.
expand on that, and how do you kind of develop like the different layers of content?
Oh, I love this question because after I started doing mom and Gen Z, like the Gen X and Gen Z
Yep.
relationship,
Yep.
I started getting a lot of comments and I used to go live a lot. So I used to get a lot of Gen Z supporters come on to my live and then they'll suggest things for me. I'm like, oh, okay. And like, especially sayings that Gen Z say that we're like, oh, okay. So I started doing that sayings. I had this series called Food Order where I'm ordering food because now you know we all order food. And then we ask our Gen Z child, "Oh, what do you want to eat?" And then so I get all these different ideas and inspiration from my Gen Z supporters and even in the comments. So I'll use the comments to also create content from that as well.
Wow. So it's a good
Yeah.
feedback loop, right? Because then you get the comment and that's what they want to see. So you
Yes.
kind of continue with that content. That's great.
And TikTok has this amazing feature, and I believe, and IG does as well, where you can post the comments that someone makes on your video. So you
Ah,
see the comment that they make, and it links back to the video that was originally the comments is from.
mhm.
So that's the great thing too. It's like inspiration from your comment, and you also give a kind of a shout out to the person who made that comment, and then they get excited, like, "Oh my gosh, she used my comment." So that's another thing where social media kind of becomes like a circle.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a conversation, right? And it's not
Mhm.
an immediate one, but it is a conversation where I think, as you said, and throughout pandemic, people looking at different ways to connect. So that's a quite natural and I guess fun way too, right? Just kind of like, hey, comment. And as you say, if someone posts it, it's like, oh my God, they actually read it and now they're, commenting or interacting with it. So it's
Yeah.
quite fun and inspiring.
Mhm.
That's how you kind of keep your followers as well, right? Interested. So
Mhm.
throughout the different tracks and they're all related and interwoven, but it's a hard industry, right, that you've chose in terms of like acting and
Yeah.
doing social media. What are some of
Mhm.
the hardest things that you came across, or like big hurdle that you had to go through, and how did you come out of it?
The biggest hurdle for any actor, and I think we learn how to accept it, is rejection
Mm,
because you go to hundreds of auditions. You only get maybe 1 or 2 callbacks, and then hopefully you book it. You might make it on the director's list, and all of a sudden they pick someone else that might fit the role better.
yes.
So just that rejection is the one thing that a lot of actors have to learn how to deal with and
Mhm,
not take it to heart because we know that it's not sometimes your performance. Sometimes one time I would do like the best performance of my life and I get so much great feedback, but maybe I didn't look the part or maybe there was
mm,
something that didn't fit. And I think actually this helped going into social media because I have a lot of friends now and I know a lot of social media people.
mm,
They get really sad about views. I mean, I would get sad about views, or they get, how come, I don't have this many followers, or how come
yeah,
my followers are stagnant? But for me, having that experience of rejection and knowing how
mm,
the industry works, it still affects me, but not as much as someone where this is all fresh.
right.
So that's where the hurdle becomes something that we develop how to run over, right?
Right over, yeah.
To push over, push through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a tough industries to
Yeah.
hit, and as you said, it's just a lot of rejection, and a lot of times there's no
Mhm.
real reason, and
Mhm.
or the reason is it's not into your control, right? It's just
Yes.
there's a certain look, there's a certain feel.
Yes.
So it's pretty hard, and but it's
Yes.
great that you're able to do different parts of it, and so creating
Mhm.
content is something you have control, a bit more control, right? Of course, you
Mhm.
still don't know who's actually liking following, but you hope that it hits with a certain population, and of course they do, and therefore you have obviously
Yes.
success in the followers and different things, but that is hard, bouncing back from rejection. Aside from having obviously that experience and just kind of toughening up over time, are there other things that you feel like you do what once to kind of overcome that feeling of low?
I was on a show called Paw Patrol. I was casted before it was like blew
Mm,
up. We
right,
didn't even know it was going to be this big.
right.
So I was casted as Farmer Yumi. Most of the pups are kids actually.
Yeah.
So
I
and there
see.
was a few of us adults that played the adults, and it was a really very humbling, very small group. It wasn't. We didn't even know how big it was going to get,
Hmm.
and we didn't even know it was going to be a Nick Jr. show. We kind of heard things about it, but we weren't sure. Like it wasn't 100% sure. They're like, yeah, it's Nick, but they couldn't tell us exactly. So I was in the first season, and then after the first season, there was a handful of us that got recasted, and I was so sad. But I knew why I got recasted, and I think one of the things that I want to tell people is always get a coach. Whenever you get a big job, just like a professional athlete, professional athletes, they all have coaches. No
Yeah.
matter like LeBron James, coach,
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, they all have coaches. And so for profession like acting or voiceover or anything, you should always have a coach as soon as you get that job, just to keep you in check, just to make sure everything's okay. And I wish that's what I had.
Mm.
I don't know if it would have made a difference, but I know that that's something that I would give advice to someone if you feel that low, is to have an accountability partner or have someone that you can turn to for all that.
Right.
Yes.
Bounce ideas or just kind of
Yeah.
like, well, this is how I feel. What do you think? And just have that kind of conversation and not just in
Yeah.
your head, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great advice. Actually, what you mentioned, I mean, even the greatest have coaches, they have
Mhm.
maybe mentors and that they still talk to because they could be at equal now, but they still talk to
Yeah.
and bounce their feelings off, right? Or practice and just get better. Because I think, with younger generations, sometimes, in conversation, you feel like, well, they all know it all, or I've done it. And it's not, it
Yeah.
like, and then you look at other people or other success and you feel like, oh, it comes easy, but it's never easy, right? And
Yeah.
even the greatest, and that is why they're the great, because they do practice and they do
Mhm.
put in a lot of work, even when they're on the top, they just have to up
Yes.
themselves. So that's good. Excellent advice. I mean, I think that everybody
Yeah.
needs to hear that sometimes, right? It's just like, no,
Yeah.
you can do better. But of
Yeah.
course, get over the hurdle. But it's the energy you're giving off is like, well, then, think of what are the things you can do better and not just kind of feel bad, right? Only feel bad for a little bit and get over it, right?
Yeah.
So and there's
Yes.
always more opportunity. On the flip side, then what is the proudest moment? Not just proudest, but like, yeah, what kind of the achievement that you feel like really propels you forward and make you feel like, okay, well, this is the right track and I'm going to do more and continue the good work.
When people DM me, or when people mention on my live, or when people mention even the comments when they say, you inspire me to be an actor, or you mean so much to me, your content makes me happy. When people say that, that's what keeps me going. And recently on Clubhouse, they have something called voice chats now.
Mm,
It's part of their 2.0. They still have live rooms, but it's like a long voicemail conversations. I actually like
mm,
this type of social audio.
mhm,
And someone said, this is one of the best conversations I heard. I'm like, oh. And it was sometimes these conversations, I start with a question that seems like frivolous or not as deep, but then it gets really deep and people really love it. And
mm.
there has been so many incidences where people have said, this is such a beautiful conversation. Thank you, Hiromi, for creating this. I love listening to everybody's shares, and people feel a connection. And I
Mm,
loved hearing people's stories. And because it's not live, people feel more comfortable leaving their story, and
mm.
then they can delete it if they want. They can say it again. And then I'll get a DM saying how special it was and how much it meant to them. So those are the things that keeps me going.
Wow.
It's people's appreciation.
That's
Mhm.
amazing. And feeling that you're able to touch a chord with a
Yeah.
certain audience, right?
Yeah.
And be able to, I guess, help them in some way, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure there are those who are at a different stage in their life in Korea, and
Mhm.
that's, what they leave comments or questions. Circling back, I mean, you mentioned recently your a LinkedIn
Yes.
instructor. So maybe talk about that experience because it extends from kind of teaching others of what you know and what you've built?
I am so excited. My course is coming out in May, so I'm just praying that everything works out well. And I did go to their studios in Carpinteria, California,
Wow.
and it was one of the coolest experiences of my professional career. Just seeing how they operate. We can't talk too much about it, but the
Mm.
workplace ethic they have, it's just, they have, it's just incredible. If I was an employee, I would love to work. It's just such a great, beautiful environment. And then how
Yeah.
they treat their instructors too. We had
Oh,
hair and makeup, the studios. It's just run so well.
mm,
And it's just incredible. I did put pictures of this. We were allowed to take pictures of this, our green room, and then the studio where they have the green screen and everything. It was just beautiful. And so how I initially got into it is, there's somebody that I know who works for the company, and then she approached me, and then she was asking me for other creators to get on board to be
mm,
instructors. And then one day she said, "Hey, let's talk about you." And then I thought I might do something TikTok or short form video related, just
mhm.
because I've been doing that and
Yeah.
teaching that on Clubhouse. And she said, how about social audio? And then so it turned into
Mm.
social audio. And then I wasn't even Clubhouse Icon back when I was asked, and also when it became Clubhouse Icon, it was almost like serendipitous too,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah. But I also talk about other social audio platforms as well.
Wow,
Yes.
awesome. Oh, so it has
Yeah.
been some time in the making, right? Because it was kind of
Yes.
parallel to what you've been doing with Clubhouse. Well, looking forward to it. It's in May, right? You said? Yes. So when do you know you're at that point where, okay, I need a break. Maybe I shouldn't take on so many rooms this week, etc. So how do you balance that?
I know this sounds very cliche, but you know how a lot of people are saying you have to learn how to say no?
Yeah.
Because I don't like missing opportunities, it's really hard for me to say no. It's really hard for me to say, "Oh, well, I can't do it." But I realize that for my mental health, I have to maybe say, "I can't do this right now, but in the
Mhm.
future, I'd love to work with you." Or in the future, maybe something can happen again. But at this point, I can't take on too much.
Right.
So those are some ways where I try not to overextend myself.
It is hard, right? I mean, again,
Mhm.
especially running your own business, it's hard to say no. And there are times where I have and I regret, you know? So there's always this thing like, well, that could be, it's a good opportunity, but I'm not sure if it fits right now. So you kind of have to
Mhm.
assess to do it or not. It's always a little bit like I don't know if you made a right decision, but as you said,
Yes.
in terms of your own mental and physical health, if you can't, you can't, right? So you gotta
Yeah.
have to know when to kind of schedule that for later. Any other like daily maintenance, right, that you kind of keep up to help keep track? Are you very strict with your schedule? Do you wake up very early? Like, what are kind of the things that you do?
I'm a night person.
Mm.
I try to be one of those early birds, but I don't wake up early because I actually like doing dishes and folding laundry really late at night. It's very therapeutic for me. So
Mm.
I do all of my cleaning at nighttime, really late at night. And
Wow.
and then I don't wake up super early, but I do write down everything. Like I actually have my agenda. I'm not a lot of people have apps to figure out
Mhm.
all their schedule. No, 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 no. I need to write down everything. Sometimes I'll like use different color pens. I'm not as intense as before, but I do like to write down everything. And
Wow.
I
I
think
guess
that's
that
all
is
honest.
therapeutic too, right? And you do a lot of exercise. Of course, you're a karate martial artist and instructor.
Mhm.
Does that help your kind of daily routine or help you kind of balance your other form of work?
During the pandemic, I was the fittest I was ever because I had to teach classes multiple times a day, every day of the week, because
Wow.
people needed that and my
Right.
students too. And yeah, so during the pandemic, it was very kind of, I don't want to say regimented, but it was very schedule oriented.
Mhm.
Now I only actually teach on the weekends.
Mhm.
So the rest of my week is mostly busy chasing after my son.
Ah, yeah.
Working around his schedule. And then because I'm homeschooling him, seeing, his therapy sessions this day, and because he's special needs, and then his activities this day, and we have activities every day for him to do, and then his tutorings this day. So being around his schedule, I do try and do some things for myself, but I am going to try and do at least yoga, meditation more. I need to put that in and maybe do
Yeah.
some my own workouts. But keeping up with him
Yeah.
is a workout in itself too. So that keeps me active and busy as well. And we like to walk everywhere. And yes,
That's
yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah.
walking is always a good
I
form of
love walking.
indirect exercise, right? I don't.
Yes,
Yeah, I do a lot of walking too, and that's really it. But it
yeah,
helps. I mean, it's good,
yeah,
and you can power walk. You can
mhm,
you can go slower and faster, right? So it is a good workout, and
yeah,
yeah, and that sounds like super busy, right? Your day to day, just with your
yeah,
son, and your daughter's older, but I'm sure there's a lot of
yeah.
interaction there, and then managing all the different work streams. So I'm just thinking like, well, have a span of very long career in the media, TV, commercial, and now social media. And we've talked about a bit, right? Of course, the hurdles, but what keeps you in? I mean, again, you did mention that like feedback and the fact that you can help people. But what really, I mean, what are the other things that keep you staying in these lanes? And or the flip side is, I mean, have you ever wanted to give up? And how do you bring yourself back to this and say, this is my passion, this is what I love?
I wanted to give up so many times because it is hard to be in this industry. It always pulls me back in some form, writing your dreams, writing your goals, writing your core values, which is really important for me.
Mm.
And then sticking with that, let life bring you on this ride. And then that's where it will take you. But still, you still have to work hard. You still have to work towards your goal. You can't just sit back and say, let the magic happen. But
Manifest, yeah.
right? But it always kind of happens when you put your heart into it. And that quote always stuck with me from that show, Castaway Diva.
Great
Yeah.
advice. Yeah, I think that's something that, I have to remind myself as well. And that's great to hear from you. And sometimes, you just at these kind of down points or crossroads, really, not really so down point, but it's just like, what am I doing? Right.
I can tell you one incident that it kind of so I've always wanted someone to help with my speech or my speaking. I've always wanted that. When my daughter was young, for
Mhm.
some reason, because I knew that I wanted to be a better speaker. I knew I wanted to be on podcasts, like professional podcasts like yours, and sound, credible and like a topic authority on what I say. And for the longest time, I didn't find anybody. And all of a sudden, I had my son, who I love so much, but he has special needs.
Mm.
And of course, you worry as a parent when your child has to struggle or has any challenges.
Mhm.
But because of his journey, I have met so many incredible people. And because he was in speech therapy, that's how I met my speech therapist. So
Oh,
that's what I mean by life gives you hurdles
yeah.
and you just have to go towards your goal, but then ultimately your goal comes back to you in ways that I would never have dreamed of, right?
Right.
So that's one example of that.
Yeah. And you strike
Yeah.
me as a very positive person. Any other advice you want to leave with our listeners?
The best advice is just to be present, be consistent,
Mm.
and be engaged. Those are what I would like to tell people when they want to be on social media or on their business journey, or just always be present, always be engaged. Engaging with
Mhm.
others. That I engage a lot with
Yeah.
people that I follow and people that follow me. Sometimes we might have times where we're like, oh,
Yeah.
but be as consistent as your mental health will allow, as my friend said.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Great
Thank
advice. And I'm
you.
taking those too. Like that's
Yeah.
great. I'm gonna keep it that
Yeah.
way as well. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think
Oh,
well,
thank you.
that's
Thank you.
yeah.
This Joyce, I'm so happy that you asked me. I'm a fan of your work and, what you post on your threads and on your Instagram, the women you feature and how you empower and uplift women. That's what I would love to do too, or what I love doing. And
Yeah.
so when you asked me, it was like, oh, yes, I did jump at this chance. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And you're no
Yeah.
very inspiring. And I've been
Oh,
wanting to ask for a while. It's just like, that I'm like, oh, how do I ask? And so I'm so glad you're able to do it and we get to chat
thank you.
again in person. I mean,
Yes.
over Zoom, it's still live
Yeah.
talking versus, in audio format or just looking at the social media. So I'm so excited. So happy
Yeah.
to be able to talk to you.